After going back and rereading One Piece, I've noticed that Oda specifically chose Zoro for the very first example of inheriting the will of Kuina. And with this, it all started to click. Why does Zoro not believe in God? Have you ever noticed Zoro's evil Goldie Roger-like smile? Did you ever notice that Oda split Ryuma into two characters, Luffy and Zoro? And why did Oda choose the demonic Asura as the inspiration for Zoro's character? You might be wondering, what do all these questions have to do with anything? Well, there may have been many hints to Zoro's lineage, including the Shimotsuki clan. But what if I told you that Oda has been saving an even bigger reveal all these years? A true bombshell that he's been ready to drop since the very beginning. The evidence is truly shocking, and I think I found the true importance of Zoro's character. And at the very end of the video, I will tell you exactly how this reveal will come into the story, and with this information, we can actually predict Zoro's final matchup, and spoiler alert, it is not Mihawk. And so today, my goal is to convince you of Zoro's true heritage and his true name, which is actually Shimotsuki D. Zoro. Now, before I get into the video, I have to make two shoutouts, one to Threevil, as he had an amazing video covering Zoro's family timeline and explaining the possibility of Zoro being Greenbull's son. I actually agree with this take, and while we won't be bringing up Greenbull all that much, we will be covering the Shimotsuki clan for Zoro, focusing more on Ryuma and Ushimaru. And I will also be referencing the idea brought up in this video that Zoro's name was changed or hidden at birth, similar to how Ace was never known to be Gold D. Ace. The second shoutout goes out to Blackbeard Vinsmoke, as he discusses these topics years ago and brings up the idea that Zoro has the will of D, so I will link both of these videos in the description. Now, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, and with all that out the way, make sure to stay tuned to the very end because I promise it will all tie together. And let's start out with Sabaody Archipelago. Do you remember the scene with Zoro and Charlos? I want to key in on this particular scene with Zoro because it's the first time that I actually considered the possibility that Zoro could legitimately have the will of D. In Dressrosa, we learn a huge reveal relating to the Will of D clan, and that is that the Will of D follows a checkered fate, and more importantly, these members are natural enemies of the gods. Now in Sabaody, there's an amazing scene where we see Charlos take a man's fiance as his own slave. He even shoots the man down for simply voicing his anger, and then Zoro walks on by as Charlos is standing in his way, and Zoro without hesitation strikes him with intent to kill Charlos. Bonnie jumps in at the last minute to fake his death and saves Zoro from creating a possibly even worse situation than Luffy, because it's very possible that Zoro could have severely injured him with a stab wound or possibly even killed him. After this, Zoro picks up the man who was shot and takes him to the hospital. Bonnie is shocked that he would stand up to a celestial dragon so nonchalantly, and the fact that he is a pirate who is going out of his way to help people. Realizing that Oda chose to display the seemingly random moment for Zoro in Sabaody Archipelago before Luffy had a chance to hit Charlos, it was when I first realized the idea that Zoro could have the will of D, but I needed way more evidence than just that, so I continued to analyze Zoro's character. And so remember this scene because it's integral and a moment that reinforces a truth to Zoro's character with his very own actions. And this is the next bit of evidence that Zoro has the will of D. It comes from Zoro's heavy inspiration of Asura for Indian mythology, and I say heavy because Zoro is clearly inspired by the Asura demons. Think about the amount of attacks that he's used with clear reference, and when we are first introduced to Zoro's character, he is known as a demon. There's also the biggest moment showing the Asura during his battle with Pika, the 9-sword style during his battle with Kaku, and his legendary clash with King of the Wildfire. Zoro is my favorite character, but I never really understood what his significance was with the Asura demon so close and tied to his character. But if you think about the 9-sword style, it is essentially an extension of who Zoro truly is. In other words, Oda painting that Zoro is truly the Asura, a god-hungry demon. Now you're going to want to pay close attention here because this next piece of evidence is truly mind-blowing. And when I found this out, I knew that Zoro had the will of D. The Asura are known specifically for being the natural enemies of the gods in their religion. this couldn't be more of a clear reference to the little meaning of the will of D that we currently have. This also gives an entirely new meaning to Zoro embracing the Asura side and becoming the self-proclaimed king of hell. Enma feeding into this demonic theme, and Oda decides to put a demonic Asura man against a god in Wano when Zoro faces king. Zoro is willing to become the king of hell for his captain's dreams, so we have king of hell versus king of the wildfire, the last member of the god race Lunarians who also once lived on the red line like the celestial dragons. Now, if you've enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button, and while you're at it, subscribe and hit that bell just like Luffy and Skypiea. And so now that I've laid out the groundwork for Zoro having the will of D, let's look a little bit more into how it fits in with this character and explore how the Shimotsuki heritage fits in with the will of D as well. And let me ask you this, why is the Shimotsuki clan so important in Wano? There are two key characters that goes out of his way to compare in the story, and that is Ryuma and Ushimaru to Zoro. And trust me, along with the will of D, this will all tie in at the end of the video, and I will tell you exactly how this reveal can happen and why the Shimotsuki clan are arguably the most important clan to Wano Kuni. So, starting with Ryuma, let's break down what we know of him. He lived through the Land of Gold era of Wano centuries ago. And now let's clear this up because I know I will get comments on this take, and many people believe that Ryuma existed 400 years ago, and I have read and reread every Ryuma section in the manga, and it nowhere at any point in the story states that he lived 400 years ago. It's always an extremely vague timeline in the past, like I mentioned, centuries ago or in the distant past. And in One Piece, these vague long time periods are almost always referring to the Void Century era or sometime near the Void Century. If he did exist 400 years ago, then why would Oda not just straight up tell us when Onimaru brings up Ryuma or during Thriller Bark when we see his corpse? The truth is that the exact time period was never mentioned by Oda directly, and this could be a possible mistranslation, and I've also seen that it may have been possibly mentioned in a magazine, but once again never confirmed directly by Oda and never brought up in the story. Which would be very easy to bring up, so in my opinion, if this is stated in the magazine, it will be changed by Oda in the future. And I will tell you exactly why I believe Ryuma is actually from the Void Century, and this matters so much more connecting him directly to Joyboy. During the meeting between Gyukimaru and Zoro, Gyukimaru states that in the long distant past, the world knew Wano as the Land of Gold. The pirates and world nobles lusted over it and desired to rule it, but one man stood against the enemies from around the world. He made it known that Wano was known as the Land of Samurai. It is implied that it was Ryuma's legend who ushered in the new age of samurai in Wano. He inspired the entire land and military force of samurai to take after his leadership. It makes me think that Ryuma actually might have been the very first samurai ever and possibly the strongest swordsman of all time. These people of Wano went from being known as wealthy and prosperous people, and Ryuma led the changed perception to a tough military force to be reckoned with. In many ways, Ryuma truly is the god of Wano, and he deserves to be named the god of the blade, because without Ryuma, Wano wouldn't even exist as we know it, and just imagine if this land never developed a culture of samurai around his legacy. When they say Shisui is the great treasure and protector of the land, it makes so much more sense with this in mind, because Shisui is a relic of a legacy, a constant reminder of why they must stand and fight as warriors and maintain the military force. The entire land of Wano in a sense has inherited Ryuma's will, or at the very least the samurai did, because symbolically shortly after Shisui was taken, Wano fell into deep despair with Kaido and Orochi conquering the nation. And so after rereading all of this, a thought came into my mind. With Luffy and Zoro both resembling Ryuma, what if Ryuma was actually Joyboy? And initially I thought it could be possible because Joyboy has a sword in his silhouette and has ties to Wano. But don't worry, I don't actually believe this, but it did lead me to an even more likely and more impactful possibility. I believe that Ryuma was the right-hand man, Nakama of Joyboy, or a young warrior apprentice and looked up to Joyboy as his era was erased. Either way, my belief is that Joyboy and Ryuma are connected, and he was so dedicated to protecting Wano because he knew that it would be the land that Joyboy would return to one day. With the inherited will theme being one concept that Oda has obsessed over in One Piece, it makes you wonder, what about the man who directly inherited Joyboy's will after he died? He would be possibly one of the most important characters in the entire series. And who better to fit this role than Ryuma himself? That's right, the Shimotsuki clan, the samurai culture and ideology, the Wano celebration celebration and honoring of death, Ryuma is the key to inherited will. Now I promise this will all make a lot more sense later in the video, but it's important that you understand this because Ryuma truly is the heart and soul of Wano and has deep ties to Joyboy and to Zoro's true name. Now what else do we know about Ryuma's character? He was known for slaying a dragon and was titled the God of the Blades. Ryuma is also the national treasure of Wano alongside Shisui, who carries on his legacy. Similarly, Zoro has fought multiple dragons and will become the next God of the Blades as the world's greatest swordsman. Inherited will is deep rooted in samurai culture, and during Lockdown we see the shopkeeper give his sword to Zoro to carry on his dreams and ambitions. He is enlightened by Zoro, who carries on the traditional customs of the Bushido Code, and Kawamatsu also explains that the swords are placed in their owners' graves in order to be used again in the future, carrying on the spirits through their blades. And this really makes me wonder about every time in One Piece when we see a weapon being placed where somebody died, for example Whitebeard's death, Ryuma, and even Onigashima. In a way, after defeating Ryuma's corpse and acquiring Shisui, Zoro may be the man who is carrying on the legacy of Ryuma in the current era, just like Luffy who is carrying on Roger and Joyboy's will with the straw hat. And just like Whitebeard says, someone will arrive carrying on the past wills of the previous centuries. Zoro also carries on the will of his right-hand man to Luffy, putting Luffy's dream as the top priority. So he's carrying Joyboy's will and also the Shimotsuki clan on his shoulders, therefore the will of D and all of Wano. When Luffy and Zoro arrive and Zoro finally returns Shisui to Hiyori, this is symbolic of the dawn finally arriving in Wano. And what does Zoro get in return? That's right, in return for Shisui, he acquires Odin's blade, also known as Enma, the demonic blade of hell. Ryuma is the main character of his own one-shot manga, who resembles both Luffy and Zoro. Ryuma would have had the will of D if the series was to carry on. The D in Monkey D. Luffy was always there since day one, so we know Oda had some idea of what the will of D is. Plus in the SBS all the way back in volume 8, Oda is asked a question of the D in Luffy's name, and Oda says to read it as just a D for now and he will reveal its meaning in time. So this shows that Oda knew it would have an important meaning since very early on in the story. The next time we hear about the will of D and the first time in the story is when Dr. Kureha mentioned how Luffy has the will of D, and this is when it's revealed that Roger also had the D in his name, Gold D Roger. This reminds her of Luffy, and I wouldn't be surprised if Luffy's straw hat also reminded her of a young Roger. So Luffy, Roger, they're constantly being compared, whether it be to the straw hat, the dream that they share, the will of D, or even their personality. There is a clear intention by Oda to show the similarities. In Wano, Luffy is also compared to Joyboy by Kaido, and more importantly by Hyogoro, who says that Gear 4 reminds him of the deity, which is a clear reference to Nika. Now in Wano, we have a very similar situation. Zoro, who is constantly being compared to the Shimotsuki clan, whether it be Ryuma or Ushimaru. We see Oda go out of his way, drawing direct panels, and even in the story, Hyogoro, like he did with Luffy, sees Ushimaru in Zoro. He says, right, I see it too. It may be peculiar and he may be a foreign pirate, but he reminds me so much of the former daimyo of Ringo when he was young. He and Shimotsuki Ushimaru are like two peas in a pod, right down to the sword handling. It's uncanny. Hyogoro continues and says Ushimaru is a fantastic swordsman, a direct descendant of the god of the blade Ryuma. He says Zoro, the one who returned Shisui to Wano, it must be fate. So yes, Zoro, just like Luffy, is connected by fate to Wano. While Joyboy is prophesied to return, symbolically, Zoro returns Shisui, marking the era of the dawn. So yeah, Zoro is guided by fate, a checkered fate. The will of the dawn has returned with the defeat of the beast pirates. The will of dawn, the will of the devil, the will of dreams, the will of destiny, whatever you want to call it. These are the biggest possibilities for what the will of D means, and they all match perfectly with Zoro. And so now let's talk about Zoro's name, and I'm not talking about Shimotsuki or will of D. What about just Zoro, and why was he named this? Another possible evidence that Zoro has inherited the Shimotsuki's will without even realizing it is because Zoro may have actually been named after Onimaru. Did you know that Zoro's name translates to fox? Zoro is also shown stealing Kinemon's Foxfire technique and Wano, and we even see the Fox connection in Skypiea with the Cloud Fox. And I've already made an entire theory on Hiyori being Zoro's future wife because she resembles the legend of the Kitsune Foxes of Japanese folklore, and because she is the Wano Samurai Princess, a perfect match for the three-sword style samurai living legend. Now, this is where Threeville's headcanon comes in, because this goes with the idea that Greenbull is actually Ushimaru's son and Zoro's father, which I believe is a very likely possibility and an answer to Zoro's Shimotsuki heritage. So hear me out. What if after Ushimaru died, Onimaru protected Greenbull and his mother and helped them escape, and because this fox was so loyal, he named Zoro after him. Onimaru also being a demon fox fits perfectly with Zoro's theme of being a demon Asura and a fox. With Greenbull being a reference to Ushimaru who wears a Greenbull coat, it could be that Zoro's name is also a reference to Ushimaru's pet. Now, more connections between Greenbull, Ushimaru, and Zoro, because Zoro said that King's race being special has nothing to do with the outcome of the fight, and we also see Zoro defend the Fishman and say that they are not all like the ones from Arlong Park. And yeah, I know he used a slur for some racist trash talk, but deep down, Zoro does not hold a prejudice or stereotypes over someone until he gives them a fair chance. It's interesting because Ushimaru was someone who accepted Yamato as an innocent child and earned her respect despite being the daughter of Kaido and the Oni race. Ushimaru was also known for wielding the sword similar to Zoro, and it makes you wonder if Kawamatsu was referring to them both using the three-sword style. Another interesting point with Ushimaru, Greenbull, and Zoro is the theme surrounding Wano, which is starvation of the citizens of the country. Zoro is introduced with standing starvation being tied up to the giant wooden cross, and just like Zoro was introduced as someone who does not eat, Greenbull is introduced as a man who has been fasting for 3 years. And finally, Ushimaru is shown in Yamato's flashback as someone who refuses to eat, so it makes me wonder, what if the Shimotsuki clan has a tradition of fasting for long periods of time without eating in their culture? And maybe this is why Zoro was able to survive all those days, because he was accustomed to this through training in the past. And this could also fit to the stories of samurai who would not eat for weeks before battle. Although it's likely that Greenbull at least has some kind of devil fruit that plays into his fasting, because 3 years is a ridiculous amount of time. But overall, these three characters are being tied into a theme of Wano being starvation and being gratitude between the food that they are given. So with Zoro's father and grandfather out of the way, I would like to go back to why I believe Shimotsuki Ryuma was someone who carried on Joyboy's legacy and will into the two earliest characters being Luffy and Zoro. But first, let me remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you've enjoyed this video so far. Have any of you ever read the one-shot Monster by Oda? It includes Ryuma as the main character. And now pay close attention to an excerpt from this one-shot, because it states that Ryuma was also called King, the swordsman who carries the world's greatest warrior's soul. Going with the statement, it furthers my belief that Ryuma carried on the will of the warrior's soul, or the warrior of liberation, Nika. Who else besides Nika or Joyboy would be the world's greatest warrior? With it specifically, it tells you how he carried on the story of Joyboy as it is warriors with the apostrophe. And it's interesting that Hyogoro is aware of not only Ryuma's legend, but also sun god Nika. This proves that in the distant past, Nika or Joyboy was a present and important figure with Wano. Another interesting thing about Ryuma's story is that he always searched for King, however he could never find him. The reason for this was because he was chasing after his own legend, as the people named him the title King. But interesting enough is that Zoro returns to his clan's homeland of Wano and he finally defeats King. And so in a way, he actually fulfilled Ryuma's will that he can never achieve. And just like Ryuma, who is known as King, it's during this fight versus King that Zoro actually becomes the King of Hell. In a way, Ryuma is the first samurai legend, just like I believe Joyboy in the past was the original pirate king. So Zoro finally returning to Wano and having the will of D to become the greatest swordsman will come full circle with the will of D. Just like Luffy, who is destined to become the pirate king, and we know he will. Zoro is destined by fate to become the greatest swordsman, and we know he will eventually defeat Mihawk as well. Now with all this information, it's time to reveal who the perfect matchup for Zoro's checkered fate is, the natural enemy of the gods. And yeah, as many of you may have guessed by now, Zoro is destined by fate to face off against the Gandhi Gorosei swordsman. A celestial dragon or a false god versus the pirate king's right-hand man, the king of hell, Shimotsuki D. Zoro. A swordsman duel for the ages, especially if he does carry a Ketetsu blade. Now I promised I would tell you why this is also important, and I will keep my promise. If you look at how Roger said that these pirates would one day surpass us, he was right. And just like Luffy is going to be the greatest captain, his crew will be the most stacked and elite crew that has ever existed. Having someone like Riley or Ben Beckman should never be understated. Oda even once said that Ben Beckman is the moon to Shanks' sun, but this quote actually fits so much better to Luffy and Zoro because Luffy being the sun god and Zoro representing the moon being from Wano Kuni. But in what way can Zoro surpass these right-hand legends and vice captains? Well, just like Oda has always been hinting at Zoro being the captain of his own crew, imagine how the world and the Gorosei will react when they find out that Zoro and not only Luffy is a Will of D member. And the thing is, Zoro would not care, and Luffy wouldn't care either. But imagine Law, Robin, and the other Yonko members as they realize just how stacked Luffy has built his crew from day one. And this will put even more respect on Luffy and the Straw Hat's name. Since when have we ever seen two Will of D members in the same crew? The only time was Ace and Blackbeard left shortly after Ace joined. So Zoro and Luffy both having the Will of D would be one of the most powerful revelations, and this would undoubtedly strike fear in the hearts of the Celestial Dragons. Joyboy and the King of Hell, two Will of D members, what a duo that would be. So now that you understand the importance of Zoro's true name, I will tell you two possible ways that it will be revealed. First, Yamato could reveal this to Zoro when she takes a closer look and realizes that he looks exactly like her friend Ushimaru. I could just picture the excitement on her face, and this could be when Yamato, Hyogoro, and others reveal the truth to Zoro and the Straw Hats. It just feels like Oda because everyone partying having a great time, and then out of nowhere we get hit with this ground-shaking reveal. Kinda like when Garp was revealed to be Luffy's grandfather, and then he brings up Dragon being Luffy's father all in a quick moment, and we already knew of the possibility of Luffy's grandfather being a marine from Aokiji, but Dragon being Luffy's father was just out of nowhere. And just like we have hints of Zoro being Shimotsuki, the shocking reveal would actually be him having the Will of D. The next possible way to reveal this comes from an encounter down the line. When Zoro ever meets Greenbull, it's possible that he will be the one to reveal the truth to Zoro about his heritage, his checkered fate, and his name. Garp is a Will of D member in the Marines, so it wouldn't shock me to see a few other Admiral level Marines also have the Will of D, and this reveal would also be a lot of fun since if Greenbull really is Zoro's father and he did name him after Onimaru, he could quickly mention his full name to Zoro and maybe even Sanji or Fujitora or someone else, since Zoro might not even care to speak to his father. So if you enjoyed this theory about Zoro having the Will of D and having ties to Shimotsuki clan, it would really go a long way if you liked the video and hit that notification bell. And if you did enjoy this video, you can continue on the journey as we uncover all of One Piece's biggest mysteries. All you have to do is click on one of these two videos.